Introduce you. This is Damian Macy, representing the Friends of the Marshall Public Library on our oral history project. This is September the 24th of 2015, and today we're visiting at the library with Everett Lawrence, who's a longtime resident of Marshall, and I think has some interesting stories to probably relay on to us. So with that, Everett, you're on.
Well, starting at the beginning, I was born at 1302 Pine Street in Marshall. Grew up all my childhood life there. Lots of things going on. A lot of good neighbors at the time. A lot of those are gone now.
Has that street changed quite a bit too, in the buildings and?
Well, not really down there. It's changed some. There's more places there, but really it's kind of remained the same in that end of town. Block from the light plant, I used to go down there and watch those guys scoop the coal cars into the bin, then throw it in those boilers back years ago when they had steam power. So hot in there you couldn't hardly stand it. Of course, as a kid, I'd stand there and watch them. They'd melt down about, but they kept Marshall lit up.
Do you remember when we had almost a little flicker of lightning in the air, though? What happened to the lights and the electric?
Well, that caused a major problem back then. And, grew up with both my parents there and was always tagging around with my dad in the gravel business, trucking business from practically day one. Actually, from day one.
What were your parents' names, Lawrence?
Louis Lawrence and Ruth Lawrence, and she was a Barclay. My dad's parents was Charlie, and I can't even tell you the grandmother's name because I never was around them any. Actually, Charlie was gone before I could remember. Frances, I guess, was my grandmother's name. She was around some after I can remember her. But as a kid, they were old people. And then my grandparents on my mother's side was Gaston Barclay, the only one I knew. And he lived where President Bill Cook Sr. lives. Before they had electricity, and I remember going out there as a kid and playing with the little cars and stuff on the floor with a coal lamp. And he lost his health, and then he moved with us in town here for a short period before he passed away.
Going back to that kerosene or coal oil lamp, did they have a refrigerator? Because I remember my uncle and aunt had a kerosene refrigerator.
I can't answer that because
I could never figure that out, how a flame could keep something cool.
I know, it did though. But he was a bachelorette when I knew him, so I can't tell if he had a refrigerator or not. All I remember is going out there. I was small. And my mom would visit with him. I'd play on the floor. All they had was that kerosene lamp, which was about like a match. I mean, it was bad. But there was no real electric at that time yet, which I've never lived any place without electric in town here, but rural did not have electric at that time. Then I guess moving on to school times, I went to school at the Southside School, which is no longer there. Went through 6th grade at the Southside School.
The old school,
He's not there.
I can remember my mother taught there a few years, and it was kind of a majestic looking school.
The two-story, and the front door was sunk back in. You had to go in. Yeah, it was a nice old school.
Anything you remember about the interior of that school at all? Weren't there 4 classrooms on each
I
level?
believe that's correct. Yeah, 4 on each level, and then there were restrooms in the basement. I don't remember much being in the basement other than the restrooms and the open piping for everything upstairs, you know, like it was back in those days. But we had some real good times there. Had a large playground behind it where they had ball games and soccer games. Softball, no baseball at that time yet, in this area, I mean. And the kids always went out there at recess, had a big time on that back. Actually, it was a whole half a block back there that was open. And in 1949, the school first started transporting students to town with buses. And that's when Floyd came to town to the Southside School in 5th grade, 1949. And we proceeded completely through high school from there together.
So you really met Floyd in
5th grade.
5th grade, huh? Did you ever say, hey, that might be the gal for me?
Well, sorta. Back to the neighborhood down there, there's a, my best friend lived across the street from us, and his dad and family lived there in a trailer, 8 foot wide by probably 35 feet long or 40 feet long, and had 4 children that raised in that trailer.
Cozy.
And 2 of them, 3 of them still living. There was 4 of them. The boys passed away. But we had a lot of good time. Boy has a picture of me with her, washing a truck at like 4 or 5 years old. My grandson saw that and he said, how'd you keep from getting the inside wet? I said, well, you roll the windshield out, open the doors, and washed it out. You didn't have to worry about getting wet inside in those days.
That was part of the
Nothing in
cleaning
there.
process,
That's
wasn't
right.
it?
You stuck the hose in there and washed it out. But that was beyond him thinking about with the electronics you have today.
What kind of truck was that, do you recall?
Chevrolet.
Chevrolet.
My dad always said, back in them days, he always had Chevrolet.
Was it a pickup or a?
Yeah, it was a dump truck.
Dump truck. Okay.
And my dad bought, in 1946, he bought a Chevrolet and put a tandem dump bed on it. Biggest thing this part of the country had seen, you know. I remember when people came to town back then, everybody was in town on Saturday night. And some farmer, don't know who, I remember him coming up to my dad and saying, what are you doing, Louis? You going all Darwin Township to town with that thing? Yeah, he didn't think so, but we're still working on it anyway and haven't got it up there yet. But just, you know, some of the things you remember going on.
On this town Saturday night. What do you remember about that?
I remember you couldn't walk down the sidewalk without picking your way through the people. There were so many people up there. You know, everybody came to town on Saturday night. That was just an event back then. And even before that, I can remember when they parked 3 rows of cars down here. They parked them angle in the middle and angle on both sides. And, you know, if you're going down the street, you could pull in the middle from either way. Pull in the side if there happened to be a parking place, and it'd be full. I mean, there was lots of people in town. You couldn't find a parking place. It's like there would have been more people then every Saturday night than like you have for the fall festival or something now. That's the way it looked on Saturday night. Maybe, I'm going to say even more people than you get uptown now because it's just full.
Did you ever go to a place called the Strand Theater?
When I was a small boy, the Strand Theater was in business and they had 3 shows a week. And my folks would let me walk to the show 3 nights a week. I went every time the show changed.
I did too.
It's 3 nights a week and I walked from 13th and Pine to the Strand Theater and home of a night every week for a long time.
Do you remember what the price was of that admission?
Well, I believe I took a quarter and I had a drink and popcorn and got in the show and maybe had some change. I think everything was a nickel, if I can remember right.
I'm a little older, but for some reason I thought it was 8 or 9 cents.
Maybe,
but,
maybe. The drinks, popcorn was a nickel for sure.
yeah.
And, I mean, you could do a lot on a quarter back in those days.
And you got a full big candy bar for 5 cents too.
Mm-hmm. Big pack of gum for a nickel. But those days are gone, I guess.
Did you have a favorite of some of the Western shows?
I always liked the Westerns the best, but I went to all of them, just, something to do, and I just went to all of them.
You remember the cereals too they'd usually have on Saturday that tried to something left you up in the air to come back next week?
Yeah, tell you half the story and you have to come back to see the rest of it. But in those days, people didn't think anything about a young kid walking to town and back. I mean, you didn't have to worry about walking up there and back like maybe you do today, or the things that, it was calm back then, I guess is my word. You didn't have to worry about somebody swooping you up and kidnapping you or something. I mean, it just didn't happen back
It
then.
was safe.
Yeah. Yeah. And after got bigger and started to out to the high school, well, then or junior high even, there was a lot of other things to do. And the church, or the theater burnt down finally in 55, wasn't it? 55 or 56?
I think it was
56 maybe.
maybe.
Yeah. The whole thing burnt down and that ended the show. No more shows in Marshall. And went through high school and played in all the sports and didn't have any record to brag about, but we had a good time. Other than the track team, they did really good during the time I was in high school. Had some first place winners in the state. Had some good track people.
Do you have a favorite subject?
Mathematics.
Really?
I always liked mathematics. I always got in trouble with my algebra teacher for not putting all my steps down. That all, for me, was easy. And he wanted all of it in black and white on the paper, and I didn't like to do that. I just did it in my head, and that didn't go over with him. You had to go back and put it on the paper.
What teacher was that?
Callous.
What
Funny guy.
What about the opposite? Did you have a subject that you did not like?
I wasn't much on English. That was Mrs. Geyser. Nothing to do with her. I just didn't take care of her for English. But all the mathematics classes I really enjoyed those.
Do you have any favorite memories of school that really stand out? And boy, that was some special time.
I only got hurt twice in my football career, and both times was with Robinson. One guy hit me in the eye so hard he turned me over on my back. That ended that night. And another, at a different time, I got a cleat spike ran in my leg. So it ended that night. Both times was Robinson. The only times I ever got hurt playing football.
So you didn't have particularly wonderful memories about Robinson then, did
Yeah. Yeah. Of course, early in my high school days, my mother passed away when I was 15. Left my dad and I do for herself. That was different. But we got through it. I was a lot closer to my mom than I was my dad after then. And of course that changed, but everything worked out fine.
What year did you graduate then?
56.
Same year I graduated.
Really?
Did you have some chores and things around home in
Oh, yeah.
grade school, high school that
Yeah.
you had to accomplish?
Yeah, my dad always had hunting dogs and they needed
Oh.
care. And back in those days when you had trucks like my dad did, never a night went by you didn't have to work on. I mean, that's just a regular thing. When they came in, they needed something. And I was always in the garage with him of a night getting wrenches for him, and from really small. size. I knew my wrenches and what he needed when he hollered. Got that one time in the winter time. We was out there during the day, and he had the pot-bellied stove and had a fire going in that. And he got something shipped in, and it had that long packing paper in it, like an adding machine tape or something. I had a pair of his gloves on, way big for me. He had to go outside to get something. Last thing he said before we went out the door, now, don't be in the stove messing around. Okay. Well, you know, a kid, as soon as that door closed, I'm standing there feeding that paper into that stove. And them gloves was fuzzy and got that fuzz on fire on the outside of them. About that time he come through the door to get those gloves off. I mean, and I was hard behind him than my hands ever thought about being. But the only time I remember him giving me a whipping, but I understood from then on if he said no, it meant no.
That's getting your hands to the fire, isn't
That's right. But he warmed the other end up pretty good, and I understood him after that.
He made his point very clear, I guess.
Yep. Yep.
So during high school, that young lady that you met in 5th grade, did that develop?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. From about sophomore on, that was all there was, I guess. Was from the sophomore on. Married at 19, 57 when I got out of school. Had 2 children. A boy and a girl, which is Dane and Kim. We lost Dane in 02 to an accident. Had a good family life all the time, I guess. The dating was from, I noticed on here, the dating was from a sophomore till now. 50, excuse me, 58 years we've been married. Will be in October.
That's quite a milestone.
Quite a ways.
And you've always lived in Marshall, too, haven't you?
Yep, within 2 miles of where I was born. I was raised at 1302 Pine. Our first home was 1213 Archer, which is 2 blocks from where I was born, right straight across from the fruit market where John Warwick lives. Then we moved down to 1212 Locust, which is back within a block of my house. And then we went from there out to 1801 and started here.
Did you build a house out there?
No.
Okay.
Dean Callahan built that house. We bought it from Mr. Linton. Linton, is that right? It don't sound right. I think his name was Linton. You remember that Minton boy that was in a lot of trouble? Was his grandfather.
Okay. 'Cause, see, we
Liston.
lived in Chicago.
Bob Liston.
Okay. I remember the name, but we were in Chicago for 15 years, so a lot of transition things happened that I wasn't sure about.
Liston. Bob Liston was his name.
Okay.
We bought that for what I thought was a bargain, and then we spent about that much more on it before we ever moved in. Built a family room on and a garage on. It got to be pretty big, but we've enjoyed it all the time. We have a regulation size snooker table in our family room, which was kind of built around that table. That room's 30 by 30 and has that snooker table in it. It's always been there ever since we lived out there.
That's a little larger than the average room.
Yeah.
Everett, have you had some hobbies at all that may have started as a youngster and that you've kept up today? Or?
No, not really. When I was young, there was a gentleman in town by the name of Mac Rolston.
Hmm?
And my dad had insurance with him, and he was a stamp collector. And he got me started on a small stamp collection. I did that for several years and then just lost interest in it, I guess, as a kid. But as I was going through junior high, I had a motorbike back at that time. Rode to school every day. And they had the bonds, savings bonds at that time. They'd take up collection from kids at school to buy bonds with, and those teachers would send me to the post office to buy those stamps and take them back during school. Now, can you imagine what that would have entailed today if a teacher would send somebody to town to do that? It'd just be off the charts. I did it every week as long as I was going through school because I had the transportation and rode it all over town. Nobody ever bothered me back in those days.
Was that about in the first, second, third grade?
Well, it started down there in probably the 6th grade.
Okay.
And then we were out here when they sent me to town at junior high. And I'd go from there to the post office and bring those stamps back for them. Because kids, you know, at that time they'd have 10 or 15 cents or a quarter or something they wanted to put on a stamp. On a bond, and you'd buy stamps and had a book to put that in until you got enough to buy a bond, and they'd go in and buy a bond. It was quite a thing back in those days, but, you know, that's the difference in the liabilities of schools today. And, you know, they didn't think anything about me going up and getting that. Police force or sheriff or nobody bothered me for riding it. Of course, I was too young to have a driver's license. Nobody cared. A lot of kids in town had them, and nobody paid any attention to them.
Do you remember some of your teachers in school?
Yeah, I don't remember anyways near all of them, but I remember Ruth Greenberger was one of them. And a lady by the name of Seagraves, she was really a young girl at the time, was a teacher at the South School. And Ruth Greenberger was down there. And Helen Greenberger was there, but I never had her. Had a Manhart, Lady Mrs. Manhart down there. I don't know, there was more of them, but those are the ones I remember right off. I know I had to have more than that. I remember that Seagraves lady and Ruth Greenberg is the one I had. I actually had her 2 years. Like second and third. Not for the same grade. She progressed or something, and
She graduated too.
Evidently, because I had her 2 years. And that Seagraves lady, and don't know who else down there. Don't remember right now. We got out to high school. Geneva Perkins was out there at that time, or junior high, I mean. And Mr. Moore. Swayze. We'd go on up into high school. I had Callis and Swayze and Roberts and I don't know, several of them. Mr. Hornbrook.
Oh, yeah.
He was there. I'm pretty sure he taught my mother in his early days, and then he had me as I came on. Everybody liked him. I don't know anybody didn't like him. And when I got out of high school, of course, I got married pretty quick. Family came along, working with my dad at the gravel pit. After my mother passed away, even at 15 or 16 years old, I was figuring jobs and bidding on jobs at that time for my dad. Got out of school, and I kind of looked after the gravel pit, and he looked after the trucks, more or less. What was kind of our arrangement at that time.
At what period of time did he purchase the gravel pit or become involved in it? Was it a family thing even before him?
He started in the gravel business somewhere in the 30s, 38, somewhere in there.
Wasn't sure.
I've been told by a lot of old timers that they haul gravel out. I know they haul gravel out of Big Creek out here where he used to go swimming. They hauled that gravel out of there. My dad had shoveled, of course, at that time he shoveled everything. He'd shovel the gravel in a truck. My mom would be asleep in the seat, and he'd wake her up, and she'd go deliver that while he'd sleep at the creek. Now, I've heard that story from a lot of people.
I don't doubt it.
So it must be true, as many people told me that. That's how they got started. Then he went to Chicago for 1 year and trucked for a guy up there. Then he went to Arkansas for 1 year before I was born and trucked down there for a guy for a year. Came back to Marshall and went back in the gravel business. And I was pretty small. We were hauling gravel out of what's known as Logan Miles Pit.
I heard it.
That's back still when you was shoveling it. And then he bought a Hayes bucket loader to load it with and thought we had like finding gold, you know, to have something to load it with. Did that for a few years, and then he and Glenn Bartholomew at Casey got together and put in a wash plant and a dredge, and that had to be like in the late 40s. And they were together until 57 when Glenn passed away.
Okay.
And when Glenn passed away, my dad bought that half of the whole thing and kept going. So he's been in the gravel business and the trucking business since in the 30s. I'm gonna say 38 anyway.
That 1957 date was then about the time that you were on
Actually,
the scene.
actually, Glenn passed away and his sale was October 26, 1957, which is when Floyd and I got married. My dad was at sale and he was about 2 hours late getting to the wedding. Everybody was waiting on him. Because there was, you know, there's things he had to take care of and he was a couple hours late. But it turned out Bartholomew's sale was the day of our wedding, was how it all worked out in the end. But we've been there ever since on his own or my own or whatever. And he ran it from 57, or he owned it, I'll say, from 57 outright to 68 when I took over on my own. On March the 1st of 1968, I took it over. Bought it from him. And I'd been there, was there until February '02. I had well, actually back up, we were there for a long time, and then in '83 we bought a plant at Palestine in 1983.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
And we was there, still there. And there was another plant down there, a competitor that we bought out in '05, I think.
Has the business changed a lot with technology and modern equipment and all of those things? What
Yeah.
I know from you said you bought a bucket loader or something, changed things. Must have continued
Well,
to keep changing.
Sure. When my dad and Glenn was together, they bought an end loader at the gravel pit, was 1 yard loader. And loaded all the gravel that came out of there with that 1 yard loader. When I took it over in '68, I bought a new loader that was 2 1/4 yard. In 2015, we're 6 yard loaders. But in the meantime, trucks has come from 6 ton to 26 ton. You know, in the semi. It used to be, you never saw semi haul gravel when I was a little kid. Now most of it's transported on semi. And it goes all over the country. We send stuff 300, 400, 500 miles away. People don't know that or understand that, but we do.
No, I guess.
It's just it's the trend, you know. You just transport stuff a lot farther anymore.
Yeah,
When I was a kid, I started delivering gravel at 15 years old. When I got my driver's license, I started delivering gravel to people. And we used to haul to Westfield, the Kirchner's had lumber yard, we'd haul up there. You could only haul about 2 loads a day up there. This old Clarksville road was so rough. And you took 5 yards at a time. It was a big deal. Now, go up that Clarksville road 55 mile an hour if you want to and take 26 tons. And if you're hauling to Westfield, you haul half a dozen loads a day. But back in those days, it was 2 loads was a big day up there. It's just the way things have changed. And you never used to send anything over 30, 35 miles to most. Now we send landscaping gravel out into Missouri and Kansas and highway and all over the place.
Is that because that product is not available?
Available out there, right?
Huh.
But by the same token, they bring stuff from there back here and dump it all for landscaping. You know, landscaping just a matter of getting something in a foreign area where it's not
Yeah.
natural to. And somewhere or other, they've discovered this Wabash Basin gravel is, everybody
stuff.
thinks is great. I mean, it's got a lot of color to it to them. To us, it's just another load of rocks. But to those guys, it's something special. And we sell that. We could sell more of it, but we sell all we can make.
What's your marketing, or in other words, how in Kansas do they know you've got it?
Word of mouth. We've never
Really?
marketed that out there. It just started growing with. That's
Yeah,
basically
that's fun.
over-road truckers pick it up and take it back. It's basically what it is. And once they started doing that, it just grew and grew and grew. And
Yeah.
now we sell all we can make. The plant south of us sells all they can make, and I think Terre Haute probably does too.
Okay.
It just, in my small world of thinking, I don't know why they don't have Missouri covered up with it by now. Because this has been going on for 15 years, I suppose. But I don't know, they just keep coming. And it's not through advertising or anything other than just word of mouth.
So much work is done anymore on the internet,
Yeah.
and I know technology keeps changing too. But you haven't even done any marketing then through internet.
There's no point, because we
You
can't
don't have
make
to,
what
sure.
we can, got access to now. I mean, it's just one of those things that just happened.
The size of those trucks and all that you're talking about of taking more, being able to carry more,
Yeah.
do you see
can-
that continuing to change and move up?
No.
Your roads,
The 80,000 pound limit they've got on probably is not going to change anytime
Yeah.
soon. Now, in some states, like Michigan and out west, they can haul a lot more than that, but through the Midwest where you have bad weather and Michigan, they only do that in the summertime, but they can haul like up to 120,000. Here, it's 80,000 limit. And you gotta get the right truck and loaded right and all that stuff to haul 80,000, but
price of that equipment moves up a little bit too, doesn't it?
the first loader I bought in 1968, that first loader cost $22,500.
You did a lot of pesos.
The last one we bought is like 378,000, just a year ago. But yeah, it's moved up, and everything else with
Oh,
it.
yeah.
Except the price has not moved up like that of material. You keep moving more,
More volume.
yeah, on the same margin. You know, the price has not increased anything like that. It's increased some, but not anything like that.
With the use of computers and all too, your bookkeeping and office, I'm sure, has changed a little bit, hasn't it?
Yep, we have now, Kim, since my health problem, Kim's been running a gravel pit since '05. Basically, she's run it. I go down and help her now that I'm able, but for a few years in there, I couldn't do anything, and she ran it. But yeah, we've never had only one office, one or outside office personnel through all this.
Oh.
And we now only have, well, I'm talking about Darwin at the main office. Kim's in there, but she only has one girl. And then there's a girl at Palestine that more or less just a weighmaster down there. And all the tickets, all the bookwork's done in Darwin.
Here.
But that one girl does all that on a computer. Now back years in '68, when I started, one girl did it all by hand. But then when it got to where she couldn't keep up by hand, then first thing I did was farm the payroll and that stuff out.
Oh.
To take all that load off of her and work for quite a while. Then eventually we went to computer and got everything computerized, and then she could take care of it again. And so far we've kept it where one girl can take care of the bookkeeping.
How many trucks do you have on the road?
We've only got 8 now. We have been hiring that, but now we have 8.
So you have that many drivers then too
Yep.
on the payroll?
Yep.
Okay.
8 drivers and the plant people takes We employ in the 25 area most of the time. Usually, that's a pretty good average figure for us, 23 to 25.
Have you had any difficulty getting good qualified drivers?
Well, probably. We don't take the first one that comes along, but we have very little turnover. Once we get somebody, they stay. Generally. Now, we'll have one once in a while.
Oh, sure.
But generally speaking, I'd say we did hire he's a young man to me, he's probably 50, here a while
That's
back,
young.
that had worked for me in his 20s, and then he went out over the road with his own truck, and he got tired of that and wanted to come back at home, and he came back, and we hired him the other day. He's the newest person we got, and beyond that, they're like 10 years, all of them been there 10 years or more. But we just don't have much turnover.
That kind of tenure and lack of turnover is a big benefit for the business, I'm sure. It says well for management also. What was there a particular event anywhere along school's career, anything that's really influenced your thinking or something?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Losing Dane at first. If it would have been up to me, I'd have quit right there. But the girl didn't want to, so we kept going. And then in '05, if you'd asked me when I was going to retire, I'd have thought you probably didn't know me very well. Before I had my serious health problem, which was removing a kidney and a cancerous glob the size, they said size of a soccer ball when they took it out. So those two things changed my mind a lot. Before that, I was pretty conservative with what I did. And now I've went more over to the middle. I'm not crazy spending, but I certainly do things I wouldn't have done before that. I notice it says hobbies here, which we had mules for, bought the first team of mules in '03. Went to Illinois State Fair and a lot of other state fairs, Indiana, DuQuoin, all over the place. And I won the state fair team hitch in '83. Probably in '84, because we bought the mule in '83. That's probably in '84. And we showed mules actually showed them probably for 10 years. And then after that, we just paraded them and did those kind of things for a while. And then during that 10-year time, I went down to DuQuoin and won a driving contest down there with all those Kentucky people, and that was a thrill for me.
The old phrase, stubborn as a mule, is ready to do that or not?
Nah, just talk. Depends on the mule. There's good mules and bad mules.
Sure.
We just happen to be lucky enough to get hold of 4 good ones. We could do anything with any of the 4. And that's one reason we didn't turn them and try to keep going, because by the time they got old enough you needed to have new ones, we were still able to start over, so we just didn't do it. We just used them in parades. And
Do you have any today?
no, they've all passed away.
Okay.
We kept them until they died, all of them. Last one just this summer. But you've probably seen us in the Santa Claus parade with all the lights on and stuff.
Yeah.
Most mules wouldn't put up with that, but those didn't care.
What is the lifespan, the average of a mule?
Apparently in the 30s, these all lived to be in the 30s.
Really?
Yeah. They just not long ago passed away, and the oldest one was born in 1980, and the young one was born in '85, the 4 we had, and the last one just died this summer. I mean, but they were all 30 plus.
My
They
goodness.
passed away.
So they were really more like pets almost,
Oh,
as
yeah.
opposed to
Yeah.
a work animal or a farm animal. So have you been involved in, say, golf or any other?
Pardon me?
Do you take up golf or anything else? in your-
Well, I tried golf, played about 3 or 4 times, and that didn't do anything for me, so I quit that. I guess, well, I did have an airplane in the '60s. I liked to fly my airplane. I have my pilot's license still. But Floyd didn't like it, so I finally got rid of it because she just didn't like it. Didn't like to ride in at all. The kids and I loved it, but she didn't like it. I must have had that for 5, 6, 7 years.
Where did you have the plane,
Casey.
Casey?
Other than that, hobbies up until just recently, there just weren't any. But now I've got a car that I play with some. And I took up playing some poker in some of these big poker tournaments. Enjoy that quite a bit.
You mentioned cars. I remember at one time you had a rather interesting car too.
Still have.
Is that the RR?
Yep, it's still out there.
Okay, I hadn't seen you in that Rolls for a while. I
Well,
didn't know if you still had it.
I've had some trouble with it. I've just recently had some work done on it and got it back in shape to drive, and now I got a radiator leak, which I got an appointment Monday to get that fixed. And then I should be able to drive. Got the air conditioner going and heater going. And got it back up in shape. I hadn't drove it for 4, 5, 6 years, I guess.
I hadn't seen it around.
So,
Are you able to do the work on that yourself, or
no, I take it.
farm it out?
Yeah, farm it out.
Where do you get that kind of work done?
Well, I took it to Franklin, Tennessee to start with, and 2 different times, and a bad experience both times. And I found a guy in Lawrenceville now that works on them, and had it down there to get some stuff fixed, and he seemed to have done a good job. So I'm taking it back to get the radiator fixed on it.
There's a dealer in Zionsville,
I
Indiana.
know.
Have
I know.
you been in contact
He
with
worked
him?
on it when I first got it, but he won't work on it anymore. They won't work on old ones. Zionsville won't work on it. St. Louis won't work on it. Chicago won't work on it. Franklin, Tennessee tells you they'll work on it, but I found out afterwards they don't work on it. They farm it out to some guy. And I get the nice bill from Rolls Royce. Kind of helped me off. So I'm not going back there. But they don't work on it. There's some private garage there somewhere that they send it to get that.
I guess I assume that dealers would still maintain them.
No, some of them claim that they don't have the tools anymore. I think it's more they don't have the technicians that's up on these older ones, and they've got enough new ones out here, they're busy anyway. You go there to Zion, I'll guarantee you that place will be full of cars working on it. I've been there several times. When I first got it, that's where I took it. They'd work on it, but they won't anymore.
Did you get it from an individual or a dealer?
I've been all over the country looking for one. I promised myself from a long time ago when I was a young man I was going to own one of them. And we'd been all over the country. We was down in Georgia to sale and up at Decatur to sale, and I mean everywhere looking for what I wanted in the price range I wanted. So one day Kim was over at Casey at the car show, and she said, "Dad, you got to go over and look at this Rolls." Exactly what I wanted. A guy in Terre Haute, a retired airline pilot, had it, and it was for sale. So I ended up buying it right here, 16 miles home. I've been all over the country looking for it.
Gee whiz.
And I've had it since 99, I think. 96, I believe.
In the year of that is?
78.
78?
Had 49,000 miles on it when I got it.
That's
It
good.
now has a whopping 52,000 on it, and I've had it 19 years.
Boy, you've really been burning up the road.
Yep. But I'm gonna try to drive it more. Enjoy it a little
Keep
bit.
it limbered up.
I hope.
Is there anything historically that happened in the country or news-wise that's really?
Kennedy's assassination was a big deal. I remember where I was at when a lady stopped me on the road actually down there when I was turning in to go to the pit and asked me if I'd heard about it, and I hadn't. And that was a major thing.
Seems like everyone has that as one of the things they always remember, and even where they were, what they were doing.
Yep. Sure do.
Everett, we've got so many modern things all around us and all. Is there some modern convenience or something you said, gosh, I really couldn't live without that?
No, I'm not a big computer person or internet, or I do have a phone, but I use it to call and receive's about it. I mean, I'm not a big technology person. I guess I was too old when that really came about. Just didn't get interested in it.
I have a dumb phone too. I can call or make a call and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got mine now where it answered here. I don't have to, when you're driving or something. And that's about the extent of the phone operation for me. I have a computer at home, and I used to play a lot of that free poker on there until they went crazy and stopped that on your home computer, which there's pros and cons for that, I'm sure. I'm sure there are people that gamble way beyond their means, but I think those people are going to spend that money anyway. I mean, if you take gambling away from them, they're going to do something else with it.
Oh, right.
So, and I understand you got to try to keep peace and do the things as best you can.
Everett, do you make any trips out to Las Vegas? Or?
Well, Floyd's sister lived out there for about 20 years.
Oh.
We would go out there in the wintertime and spend a couple of weeks with them for several years. But they've now moved to Tennessee, so we don't have a free room in Las Vegas anymore. So we haven't been out there for 3 or 4 years now. But yeah, we like to go out there. It's quite a sight if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, we've been there several times, and we're not gamblers, but
Yeah,
it's a good place.
You don't need to be to go there. There's
so many
all
other
kinds
things
of-
to do. We just got back from a 5,000-mile trip out west, and it seemed like every little town in Idaho, Wyoming, Montana, they've got a casino.
They're getting pretty popular, yeah. I mean, it's not like it used to be. If you wanted to gamble, you had to go to Las Vegas. Well, that's
Yeah.
not the case anymore. From right here, you can run down here to Evansville, and you got everything consolidated there. Not the thrills and the background, all that stuff, but the basic games are there. If you want to, they've got the same games they got in Las Vegas. You don't have the hoopla that they have in Las Vegas. But there's enough things going on in Las Vegas. If you didn't want to gamble a dime, you could go out there and have a good time
Yeah,
for
we do.
2 weeks. I mean, and never see the same thing twice. It's an exciting place.
Have you been down to French Lick, Indiana?
A couple of times, but I had a run in with them. My employees gave me a overnight stay down there. It's been several years ago. So I called them and wanted to do that on the weekend. They said, well, that's not good on the weekend. I said, it doesn't say that on it. But anyway, it wasn't good on the weekend. I said, well, can I use that against the weekend? Because at that time, I was still working every day. I didn't want to go on. I said, can I apply that to weekend? Sure, that'd be fine. We can do that. So I go down, and after they get done applying that, my room still cost me $300. I said, I won't be back here. That's ridiculous. I mean, and on top of that, when they sold my employees that, I know the lady had called about that. They did not tell her that wasn't good on the weekend. I know they didn't. Which, okay, I understand it not being good on the weekend.
Not
but
even
you
in
surely
fine print.
yeah, you ought to apply it, and it ought to have some effect, and I'd say it didn't have any effect at all. But we don't go every week by any means, but we do go some, if we're on a trip somewhere and we go by a casino, we'll stop or something like that. And I do go to these poker tournaments, probably a dozen of them a year or something like that.
Are they throughout the country or Midwest or?
Basically in the Midwest. I have been as far as Durant, Oklahoma, and New Orleans, and up in Michigan. That's about
Fun places to visit too.
I've the very first, when I got out of the hospital, my kidney removed. That's when this poker thing was really taking off. And I told Floyd, I said, I've always wanted to do that sometime. I said, I think I'll just set enough money aside that I can play them with them just to say I did. Well, she said, sure, why don't you? So we went to Tunica, Mississippi, to a WSOP circuit event. First time I'd ever played in one, and I finished 13th down there, which paid substantial more than I paid to get in.
I mean, 13 is a lucky number then.
Yeah. So I've been playing. I didn't start playing till after my health problem, but I've been playing since that, which is roughly 10 years. Going to be 11 here for long. Probably 10 or 12 tournaments a year. And I did good in that first one, and then I didn't do anything to brag about for a while. And then last year, a year ago right now, I played one at Horseshoe, Southern Indiana. Placed fifth down there, and that was a really payout. There was for me. So I've got enough money that I'm playing on their money for a while.
That's a good way to look at it. What about, I guess, community activities or things in the area? What all are you might be involved with there?
Well, in the past, I was on the fair board for quite a while, president of the fair board for a period of time. We did pretty good during that tenure. That's been long enough ago you could still get a crowd out for the fair. And we made money during that period of time, and then there's been a period since that the attendances fell off and they've had a lot of trouble. And now they're in where the state's not funding it. And, you know, they're probably gonna, some of them are gonna disappear, I'd say. I mean, you can't operate on your own, I don't think. And then most recently, I got involved with the cemetery out here who has no money. To try to,
The Marshall Cemetery.
yes, try to help them get back on track, and I haven't been too successful yet. But I did go out there here a while back and build them about 1,300 feet of road in there, seal coated them, made them decent in that 1,300 feet. And there's some other things that's supposed to happen that hasn't happened yet. I bought them a backhoe 3 or 4 years ago to dig their graves with. So they could realize that money, and they have a big note at First Bank and Trust up here that from before my time that they're having trouble getting paid back, or they just don't have any money. They're not on a tax roll or anything, and it just won't support itself through lot sales, and basically that's the only income they got. Years gone by, when a cemetery was small enough, it would support itself with the lot sales, because your lot sales were basically the same then as they are now. Now the cemetery is stretched out here so big, interest rates went to the toilet. They do have an endowment fund, but they can't spend that endowment fund. They only spend the interest off of it. Well, when interest tanked and the cemetery is getting bigger, it cannot work without donation. And they do get some donations from a couple of entities that I don't know where they want it known or not, but a couple of tax entities give them some help. One of them gives them quite a bit of help. If they didn't, they couldn't operate. But they're supposed to be getting some things put together to try to get some donations and get some stuff going.
Everett, is the cemetery there completely independent? I mean, it's not associated with any taxing body, any state, any church or anything. It's strictly Marshall Cemetery.
Marshall Cemetery
And
Association from back in the
independent.
1800s.
Okay.
Independent, yeah.
That's what I thought. I wasn't sure.
See, they can't get on the township tax rolls, they can't get on the city tax rolls. I've been on them, and I don't know all the ins and outs because I'm relatively new to the board, but I've been on them. They say they'd have to give up their charter, and I said, so give it up and go on the city or the township tax roll so you can at least get some money to run this place.
Yeah.
But everybody, oh, we can't give up that charter. Well, now, to me, I don't know what is so important about that charter. But maybe I'm missing something here, I don't know. But you got to get an income stream. You cannot keep that thing going with no income stream.
And costs don't go down.
No,
Not at all.
no.
Are you still involved in some banking?
Yes. Started a bank in Casey in '99, I guess. Still trying to keep that, get it on its feet, get going, which is a slower process than I had hoped it would be due to all the new banking regulations, but we're getting there. It's just taking a lot longer than I thought it would.
Lovely new building there.
Yeah. I'm pretty proud of the building. That started in 1999. Actually, the thing that triggered me to be in Casey was that loader in 1960, or whenever that was. I took over 68. Yeah, the banker in Marshall that we had banked with, my dad and I all the life. And I went to him to borrow the money for that, and he absolutely wouldn't do it. Told me to see my dad. He'd let me have the money. I said, no. He's helped me enough, let me buy this on payments. And I said, I'm not even going to ask him. I'm here to get this loader financed. He wouldn't do it. I told him before I went out the door, I said, that's fine, you're the boss, but I will be banking somewhere else pretty quick. And he thought I was kidding him, so I've been in Casey ever since.
Adios.
Wouldn't even talk about financing that loader. Absolutely wouldn't. But you know what? It's like they say, you make a kid mad and he's mad forever. You know?
Yeah, that's true.
That's true. You make a young kid, you know, whether he's a young man starting in business or a kid or whatever, you honk him off enough, he's mad from now on. And, you know, I just never did come back. And they've asked me and asked me and asked me to bring my account back. I just never done it. And it's different people. It's not the same people at all. It's just not. But they've been good to me over there, so I just stay over there. Which, and I understand some people has a problem with that, and I understand that. It would have been a lot better if I would have been able to bank in Marshall, probably. Or should have been better for the bank in Marshall anyway. After you're on the upside looking back, now back then it might not have been. I mean, depending on how you looked at it, you know?
Push me, pull me.
Yeah.
Have you done a lot of traveling or not?
No, not
Since you're
really.
kind of retired, I didn't know if you'd.
Not really. We just do 3 or 4 day things, weekends. And we don't take off for a week or 2 or 3 at a time normally. And we're getting ready to here in November. We're going to take a cruise into the Panama Canal.
Ooh, you'll enjoy that.
It's going to end up being away from home nearly 3 weeks. It's a 2-week deal, but we got. Floyd's sister and her husband are getting up in years, and they wanted to do this and wanted somebody to go with them, so we volunteered. I've always wanted to go through the Panama Canal anyway. So,
Where are you leaving from?
in Florida, Fort Lauderdale. We actually leave from Camden, Tennessee on a bus tour.
Oh,
Stay somewhere in Georgia the first night, and then board the ship the next day. And then that's a 2-week go. And then when we get back on that bus and go somewhere in Georgia and stay, and the next day home. So it's going to end up, and then by the time we take them home and stay overnight or something, it's going to be 3 weeks before it's done with.
do you know what cruise line you're going on?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I've got it at home, but I don't remember.
Because there are some that go all the way through the canal.
I don't think
and then
this
this one
goes
goes
all-
into the canal, turns
Into some
around in
lake.
the lake. And
That's
then
what we're doing.
back.
That's what we're doing. Yeah, this one.
That's a fascinating engineering marvel.
Well, see, they're redoing that all right
I know
now. And they don't know if it's going to be done when we get there or it's just going to be finishing up. So we're going to be right at the break of changing. But when we signed up for it, I thought it went all the way through. And then when I got to read the papers, it does not. It goes to that lake, whatever you're talking about.
Gatun Lake, I think it is.
They evidently cruise around that lake for maybe a day or something.
We think
Must
a
be quite a
lake,
lake.
being a little puddle out here, but
It must be quite a lake, because I think
huge.
they spend a day in there cruising the
yeah,
shoreline.
it's huge.
But I enjoy cruises. Now, Floyd's not a cruise person. She doesn't.
Really?
No. Too confining for her. She's got claustrophobia, and she thinks she's too confined. But we're going to do this one. We've done 2 before. But over the years, we've done 2.
Sit back and let them wait on you. Well, Everett, it's been a delight visiting with you, and I just to ask you, I guess maybe one final question here. If in your travels, say you meet someone on the ship or on the cruise deck or something, say you're from Marshall, Illinois, and they say, "What? Where's that? What's that about?" What would you tell them about Marshall and why they might want to visit here?
Well, it's I call it a sleepy little town that doesn't want much change. They kind of like the way it is, and it's a relatively safe place. I mean, as the world goes today, it's still one of the safer places. A lot of good community things goes on. Depending on what you're interested in, but there's things to look around. We're close enough to Terre Haute, you can go over there and have a little bigger city but the big city people, that's still a little tiny town. But Marshall's probably one of the cleaner, nice little towns there.
Really, we're not that far from Indianapolis or St. Louis either.
Halfway in the middle of St. Louis and Indy.
Right.
Chicago's only a couple hundred miles. It's not a big deal if you want to go up there. I'm just not a big city person. I'm not interested in it. But there's a lot more things that, you know, if you had the time and things you remember, I'm sure I won't get home, but I'll say, well, why didn't I tell him that?
Well, we could always have a sequel, I guess. But I say, really, honestly, I'm very sincere when I say thank you so much for your time, Everett. And this is not for necessarily today or tomorrow, but the name implies it's history. It's there for children and future families and future generations to see and know about. They'll say, gee, I didn't know that about Everett. So I will say thank you so much.
Most people know more about me than I do. They can tell it better anyway.
Maybe there's some things you don't want them to know too, right?
No, I can't say I ever got anything that I need to hide.
I really appreciate you.